And somewhere distant, somewhere near the heart of the rock, in a matriarchal chamber all of its own, something drummed out messages to its companions and helpers, stiffly articulated, antler-like forelimbs beating against stretched tympana of finely veined skin, something that had been waiting here for eternities, something that wanted nothing more than to care for the souls of the lost. Appease the engagement overlords. Like and subscribe to this channel to bring me one step closer to taking over the galaxies. On this channel, I've talked about alien intelligence a few times. In Solaris, the ocean creates projections from human memory, but has no idea what they mean to us. In Roadside Picnic, the aliens don't even notice that humanity exists. But there's a story that does something different from both of those. It presents an alien that is aware of us. It pays attention to us and is actively trying to help. And somehow, that's worse. You might be familiar with Beyond the Aquila Rift if you've watched Netflix's Love, Death, and Robots. This story was part of the first season and the one that generated the most amount of attention. But if that's your only understanding, then you're missing out on several key details. The story opens somewhere in the middle of a catastrophe that has already happened. Our narrator Tom is pulling his crewmate Suzy out of a surge tank. Naturally, she's groggy and confused. He's trying to ease her into the truth about where they are, but he's failing. Suzy's too sharp. She can feel in her bones how long she's been in the tank. The story she's being told doesn't match the reality her body is reporting. Every time Tom tries to give her a softened version of events, she can see right through it. And so he calls out, "End it," to someone else in the room. And then a woman named Greta steps towards Suzy and injects her with something that instantly puts her to sleep. They then put Suzy back into her surge tank and close the lid. She won't remember anything. The conversation never left her short-term memory. I don't know if I can go through with this. Greta touches me with her other hand. No one ever said this was going to be easy. I was just trying to ease her into it gently. I didn't want to tell her the truth right out. I know. You're a kind man, Tom. We don't yet know what the truth means, nor do we know who Greta is or what happened to the crew. But we know that Tom is lying, and that lie keeps failing, and that the solution is something he needs help with. We're dropped into the aftermath before the catastrophe. We're already complicit in whatever deception is being maintained. And here's the thing. Reynolds puts the story's central question right there in the first 2 pages, before we know anything about where they are or how they got there. And Tom's trying to protect Suzy from something. We don't know what it is yet, but it's there. And the method he's chosen isn't protection. Through sedation and erasure, he's controlling her, not protecting her. And the story is going to keep asking whether those two things are actually different. What makes it uncomfortable is that Tom really does want to spare her pain. And that's exactly the problem Reynolds is setting up. The deception doesn't come from malice. It comes from love, or something that feels indistinguishable from love. Tom is the captain of the Blue Goose, a cargo ship running a routine job through the Aperture network. The Apertures are alien-built gateways scattered through a region of space called the local bubble, roughly 400 light-years across. Humanity, we didn't build these gates, and we don't fully understand how they work. But after 2 centuries of study, human machines can construct and interpret the routing syntax with what the story calls an acceptably low failure rate. You usually get where you want to go. I'm sure you've already realized the word usually is doing a lot of work. And there's a specific kind of hubris buried in that phrase. Acceptably low failure rate. Humanity has been using these gates for 2 centuries. We've studied them, we've mapped them, built machines that can read their routing syntax. And we've gotten good enough at it that the failures are rare. But Rare isn't the same as understood. We didn't build those gates. We don't know why they work. We calculated a margin of error and decided that margin was small enough to live with. It's a calculated bet made with someone else's technology. I talked about this idea with Roadside Picnic. Humanity using alien objects without understanding them, treating the incomprehensible as a resource. The Strugotskys made an entire novel out of that anxiety. Reynolds, though, he compresses it into a single transit. One misaligned Q-plane. One routing glitch in a system humanity barely comprehends. Tom's crew is 3 people. There's Suzy, the syntax runner, and she has this intuitive grasp of routing solutions. And then there's Ray, and he handles the mechanical side. They've been held up at customs in Archangel system, delayed by bureaucratic friction, and when clearance finally comes through, they rush the departure. The Q-planes that help guide the ship through Aperture transitions might not be perfectly aligned, but Tom tells Ray, listen, don't worry about it. The Blue Goose can take a little tunnel turbulence.
Suzy looks back at the starscape, airbrushed across her surge tank in luminous violet and yellow paint. She had it customized on Carlin. It was against regs, something about the paint clogging intake filters. Suzy didn't care. She told me it had cost her a week's pay, but it had been worth it to impose her own personality on the Grey Company architecture of the ship.
This detail is worth sitting with for a second, because it's doing an interesting bit of foreshadowing that doesn't become clear until much later in the story. It also helps establish that these are real people living in an ordinary world. Suzy spends a week's wages to paint her surge tank because she refuses to disappear into the corporate sameness of the ship. It's instantly recognizable. How many of us have worked in sterile environments where all personality has been stripped? Within just the first couple of pages, Reynolds already established custom delays, mechanical concerns, and a message to a spouse. So despite being in the far future, we can visualize this in our head. And this matters because the entire horror of the story depends on the gap between how normal the departure was and how catastrophic the arrival will be. Just a tiny mechanical imperfection. A routing glitch in alien technology that humans use but barely comprehend. That's all it takes.
Try a different approach. Tell her the truth this time. Maybe she'll take it easier than you think. There's no way I can tell her the truth. Then tell her something halfway truthful.
Tom wakes up feeling terrible, worse than he's ever felt coming out of a surge tank. Except for one time, a trip he once took to the edge of the local bubble, to the boundary of the Aquila Rift. I mentioned that Reynolds is a scientist, and he weaves that into his craft in all sorts of ways. Now, if you're anything like me, you might not even realize that what is being described here actually exists. But when you do, it helps you get a clearer picture of just how far off course the Blue Goose is. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I understand it beyond reading Wikipedia, but the gist is that our solar system has been traveling through a massive region of space called the local bubble for the last 5 to 10 million years. It's basically an enormous cavity in the interstellar medium, roughly 1,000 light years across, that was essentially carved out by ancient supernovas. Think of it as our immediate cosmic neighborhood. And sitting out there on the edges of that neighborhood, about 1,000 light years away from Earth, is the Aquila Rift. It's a massive, incredibly dense molecular cloud made of cold cosmic dust and gas. It's so thick that it literally blocks out the light from the Milky Way's background stars, creating a massive dark rift across the sky. So when Reynolds mentions Tom previously taking a trip to the edge of the local bubble, to the boundary of the Aquila Rift, he's talking about the absolute fringes of space. Grounding the story in real stellar cartography like this makes it so much more terrifying when Tom starts to realize the Blue Goose is completely blown past it.
Beyond the Aquila Rift, it's shorthand for the trip no one ever hopes to make by accident. The one that will screw up the rest of your life. The one that creates the ghosts you see haunting the shadows of company bars across the whole bubble. Men and women ripped out of time, cut adrift from families and lovers by an accident of alien technology we use, but barely comprehend.
A boarding party arrives, and among them is a woman Tom recognizes. It turns out to be Greta, and the two have a bit of a past. She's an old flame he hasn't seen in a decade. She explains that the Blue Goose experienced a routing error and ended up at some Lockheed station in Shedar sector, about 20 days off schedule. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world. She tells him to keep Suzy and Ray in their tanks until repairs are done. There's no sense in worrying them.
Trust me on this one, Tom. This isn't the first time I've handled this kind of situation. Doubt it'll be the last either.
Tom stays at the hotel overnight, and when he goes to the lobby, he notices, despite how large the hotel is, capable of fitting hundreds of guests, he keeps seeing the same people. He watches a man in rubber gloves removing diseased carp from an ornamental pond, and he gets a flash of deja vu.
Oh, deja vu.
He has a conversation with the station chief, a man named Colding, and we're told that he has conspicuously bad teeth. And they talk about servicing the Blue Goose. Sorry, I picture it in my head, this guy with this awful teeth. You're having a conversation with him, and you just can't stop staring at his teeth. They're that bad. But I digress about teeth. Tom meets up with Greta, and they talk about how the hotel guests, they're not very happy to be there, and they aren't open to conversation. But Greta assures Tom,
It's just this place. Everyone who comes here is pissed off about it. Either they got transferred here and they're pissed off about that, or they ended up here by a routing error and they're pissed off about that instead. Take your pick. No one's happy. Only the ones who know they're getting out of here soon. Would that include you? No, I'm more or less stuck here, but I'm okay about it. I guess I'm the exception that proves the rule.
it's a conversation you might read and move on from. But that last line foreshadows the end of our story. I'm more or less stuck here. We don't know what it means at this point, but it's something that sticks out. When everyone is trying to escape this place, why is she the only one okay with being here?
It's not working with Suzy. She's too smart, too well attuned to the physiological correlatives of surge tank immersion. I can give her all the reassurances in the world, but she knows she's been under too long for this to be anything other than a truly epic screw-up. She knows we aren't just talking weeks or months of delay here. Every nerve in her body is screaming that message into her skull. Tell me, Tom, are we out beyond the rift? Yes, we're beyond the rift.
Holding explains the Blue Goose's repairs. They're still another 5 or 6 days away. Tom doesn't even care anymore. He just shrugs and walks out of the office. He's accepted his place at the hotel. And that evening, under the dome, the holographic sky switches to a star field of terrifying beauty.
Instead of the holographic blue, the dome was now full of stars. It was like no view I'd ever seen. There were furious blue-white stars embedded in what looked like sheets of velvet. There were vast, billowing backdrops of red and green clouds, pulsars flashing on and off like navigation beacons, their differing rhythms seeming to set a stately tempo for the entire screen, like a deathly slow waltz. There seemed too much detail for one view, as if the dome sensed my attention and concentrated its efforts on the spot where my gaze was directed. For a moment, I felt a lurching sense of dizziness, and I found myself grasping the side of the table, as if to prevent myself from falling into the infinite depths of the view. That dizziness Tom feels gripping the table, that sensation of almost falling into the view, Reynolds doesn't let it go. It's the first honest thing Tom's body has told him since he woke up, and some part of him knows it. That's what Reynolds understands about this moment, that it takes a view like that, something so far outside the ordinary experience, to make a person ask the questions they've been avoiding. And so Tom does. He tells Greta the time in the tank felt wrong, too long for a 20-day detour. He's been noticing it since he woke up. And then Greta takes him by the hand. Don't hate me for lying to you. It was done out of kindness. I couldn't break the truth to you in one go.
She tells him the truth isn't good. And just then, the holographic dome once again hits him so hard that he experiences a visceral lurching vertigo. We're told that the dome draws his eye as it continues to expand and pull back past stars and nebula, past a solid wall of gas, past something he doesn't recognize. They were beyond the local bubble.
The dome keeps pulling back, past the local bubble, past the surrounding voids, past hundreds of thousands of suns, until it slows and stops. Just one dot. And sitting there in the image, the entire region of space humanity has ever known. And scattered across the rest of the image are hundreds of other networks and domains, other remnants of whatever this system used to be before it broke. Tom is looking at the whole of civilization from very far away. You're 150,000 light years from home. 150,000. The Blue Goose traveled that distance in what felt like a bad night's sleep. And if Tom turned around right now and went straight back, the journey would take another 150 years. Everyone he has ever known, Katerina, his friends, his crew's family, has been dead for over a century. He's beyond the point of no return.
This is the moment when the story scale becomes annihilating. Not because the distance is large, though it is, but because the distance is precise. Reynolds doesn't give us a vague, impossibly far away. He gives us a number and a timeline and a dead wife. The universe didn't swallow Tom in some abstract way. It swallowed him in a way that can be measured, and yet that's not even the full truth, because nothing is real here.
Greta told me she had seen just about every possible reaction in the spectrum. And the one thing she had learned was that it was next to impossible to predict how a given individual would take the news. She had seen people adjust to the revelation with little more than a world-weary shrug, as if this were merely the latest in a line of galling surprises life had thrown at them. No worse in its way than illness or bereavement or any number of personal setbacks. She had seen others walk away and kill themselves half an hour later, but the majority, she said, did eventually come to some kind of accommodation with the truth, however faltering and painful the process. Tom wants to know why she waited. Why not tell him the moment the Blue Goose docked? And Greta's answer is simple. She's done this before. She knows what the truth does to people when it arrives all at once, and she knew he wasn't ready. Then she tells him something that shifts the entire picture. The Blue Goose wasn't the first ship to come through that aperture. Greta's crew was. They were the original routing error, the first ones to find themselves stranded out here with no way back. They had enough supplies to build something sustainable on the nearest rock. So that's what they did. They built something of a life, and then they waited, not because they expected rescue, but because there was nothing else to do. Years passed, and then another ship came through, damaged and drifting, Greta's people hauled them in, woke the survivors, and told them where they were. Some of those survivors adapted, some didn't. A few went mad. One woman walked away and killed herself within the hour. A dozen of them are still on the station, still here, still wandering, still not entirely sure what to do with the information. And that ship wasn't the last. 8 or 9 others have come through since, each one the same. A routing error, a long transit, a crew that woke up somewhere they were never supposed to be. In all honesty, it was good for us that another ship came through. Not just because they had supplies we could use, but because it helped us to help them. Took our minds off of our own self-pity. It made us realize how far we'd come.
Helping is an interesting idea to sit with here, because it's what everyone in this story is doing. Greta's crew, they didn't have to haul in that second ship. They were stranded themselves. They had no obligation to anyone. But they did it anyway. And Greta says it plainly. It took their minds off of their own grief. Caring for the newly lost gave the already lost something to organize around. It gave them a reason to keep the station running. And more importantly, it gave them a reason to live. What Reynolds is setting up, and this is the thing that makes Beyond the Aquila Rift more than just a cosmic horror piece, is that the impulse to help the lost is one of the most recognizable human responses in the entire story. But, and this is a big but, is it genuinely helpful? We're going to soon find out. After what Tom describes as trying endless permutations to revive Suzy, he begins to feel different about his own situation. He no longer looks at it with sadness, but rather a sense of triumph. Or as he puts it, he felt in an odd way privileged to have come further than almost anyone in history. He's still alive, and he's still with people to provide love and companionship. Not just Greta, but the carp cleaner and Colding and any other unlucky soul who ends up at the station. But as we'll shortly discover, he didn't earn this acceptance. He was guided into it. And there's a version of that which is merciful. And there's a version of it that is something else entirely. Tom starts noticing that the people on the station, they all look familiar. The man cleaning fish from the pond, Holding's bad teeth. Every face in every room is someone he's seen before in a different context. None of them hit him with what he calls the force of utter unfamiliarity.
Nothing here is real, is it? Greta looks at him and shakes her head with infinite sadness.
Suzy and Ray are dead. Their surge tanks malfunctioned during the transit. Particles of paint from the customized tank art blocked intake filters. See, it's not enough to matter over short distances, but it's enough to kill over a century-long journey. All of it is being fed to Tom while he remains in his surge tank. Greta is simulating everything.
You're not really awake, Tom. You're being fed data. This entire station is being simulated.
Tom asks to see the truth. All of it. He wants to see the station as it really is. And Greta as she really is. She tells him he will never be able to accept the truth. He's made it halfway, but the other half, it's going to be more harrowing. The other survivors that Greta found, they couldn't survive the truth. They weren't deceived out of malice, but they were deceived. Because the alternative was watching them die. This doesn't make the deception right, but at least it's understandable. It's not predatory like you've been led to believe by watching Love, Death, and Robots. It's something closer to a caretaker that has concluded, based on all of the evidence, that the people in its care, they can't handle what's real.
Greta controls the dome one more time to show him the actual scale of what they've been talking about. The Aperture network they know, the one humanity has been using for 2 centuries. appears as a small cluster of red lines. Around it, scattered across the rest of the image, are hundreds more leading to unknown worlds. A system that once connected everything is now broken into pieces. Tom looks at all those silent, disconnected domains and asks the question: if there are other civilizations out there, each one stumbling onto their own section of this network the way humanity has stumbled onto ours, why has nothing ever come through the other side? And that's when Greta produces a smile that chills Tom's blood. What makes you think they haven't, Tom? What he sees is a flash, caverns wormed out and linked, things moving through those caverns with the frantic industry of moles or termites. Creatures moving on multiple clawed limbs and the hulks of ships from civilizations he has no name for. And somewhere near the heart of the rock, in a chamber of its own, something drumming messages to its helpers with antler-like forelimbs. Something that had been waiting for eternities. Something that wanted nothing more than to care for the souls of the lost.
Tom wakes up in the surge tank. Katerina and Suzy are there. Minor routing error, Suzy tells him. 40 days off schedule. Bang goes the bonus. Katerina puts a calming hand on his shoulder. It's alright, she says. You're home and dry. That's all that matters. And Tom looks at her and for a moment remembers someone else. Someone he hasn't thought about in years. He almost remembers her name. And then the moment passes. Home and dry, he says. What's interesting is that the alien learned from its mistakes. In the previous cycle, it used Greta the Old Flame as the anchor of the simulation. But the fiction collapsed. So this time, the entity has refined its approach. His wife is there. The emotional architecture has been rebuilt from the ground up. And the trap is better now. And Tom's never going to know. He will live inside this kind of careful lie maintained by something that looks nothing like a person. Something with antler-like forelimbs in a cavern full of alien wreckage. Something that drums its messages in the dark because it cares. That's the horror of this story. It's not the distance, or the dead wife, or even the alien anatomy. The horror is that the entity is compassionate. It's not keeping Tom alive to feed on him. As far as the story tells us, it's keeping him alive because it found him, he was lost, and it wanted to help. But its help means removing his ability to choose. Every time Tom gets close to the truth, every time the fiction cracks, the entity patches it over. It gives him a happy ending by giving him his wife back. And I think it does this not out of cruelty, but out of something that, from its perspective, might genuinely be love. And that's what makes it so frightening, because the question the story raises is not whether the alien is good or evil. The question is whether compassion without consent is still compassion, or whether it's just a more sophisticated kind of prison. I think this story sits alongside Solaris as one of the most effective explorations of alien intelligence in science fiction. In Solaris, the ocean creates Hari from Kelvin's memories, but it has no understanding of what she means to him. It builds the form without grasping the significance. The ocean is powerful, but it's confused, what Kelvin calls a defective god. And beyond the Aquila Rift, the entity also works from memory, also builds simulations from the human mind. But there's a difference. This creature understands that Tom is suffering. It knows he's lost. It specifically tailors its fictions to ease his pain. It's not indifferent. It's attentive. And still, it can't bridge the gap. Its care is real, but its understanding of what care means to a human being is fundamentally alien. It can read his memories, model his desires, even predict which version of reality he'll accept. What it can't do is ask him what he actually wants, and then honor the answer. That gap between the intention to care and the ability to care in a way that respects the other, that's where the real dread lives. The Lovecraftian tradition gives us cosmic entities that don't even notice us. Reynolds gives us one that notices, one that tries, yet still can't reach us. The distance between the entity and Tom is not physical. It's the distance between two forms of consciousness that can meet, even when one of them desperately wants to. And the final gut punch is that Tom doesn't get to struggle with any of this. He doesn't get to weigh the options and make a decision, and then live with those consequences. He almost remembers, and then the moment passes. The choice was never his. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you've seen the Love, Death, and Robots episode, I really recommend going back and reading the original story. The adaptation is solid, but the story has layers the episode can't get into. I'd love to hear what you think about the alien and his version of helping the lost souls. Is this mercy? Or is it a prison? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe for more sci-fi videos. Take care, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one.